Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and the blessing of Allah be with you all. Thank you for joining this evening for our NIA Fireside Chat. I know we are competing tonight, like every Thursday night, with a number of other programs. Normally we complete with the Thursday night football. Tonight we have baseball. And of course we have the last and final debate, the presidential debate. Inshallah, we're going to try to finish in time for you to catch a debate as soon as they start warming up. So don't worry, sit tight. We'll have an intriguing discussion and you'll still have a chance to go into the debate. So once again, thank you for joining with us. We'll dive right in. I know we spent a lot of time, Brother Baker, thanks for joining again. We spent a lot of time talking about the festival of Eid. We talked a lot about Ramadan and the celebration and the Muslim festivities. But we are right in the holiday season in America. And the season of Thanksgiving, the season of Halloween and Christmas and everything else. And next week, obviously, is Halloween. And a lot of us grew up, or many of the kids who are watching grew up going to school, doing trick-or-treat. Some people go to Halloween parties and costumes. And let's just dive right in and talk a little bit about the Islamic perspective. Celebrate or not celebrate Halloween?
Well, this is a very good question. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. One of the things that we as Muslims have to remember, and even as Americans, is that there's always a holiday. Just never forget that. So, and no matter what time of year, no matter what month you're in, there's always some sort of holiday. And some of them we can partake in them and participate, and some of them we cannot. And the key differentiating factor here is the Prophet ﷺ telling us that us as Muslims, we have two holidays. And it's an Eid al-Fitr and an Eid al-Adha. And what the Prophet ﷺ meant by this is that these are holidays by which we celebrate that have a religious basis. We can only celebrate those that the Prophet ﷺ told us. Other things that we can celebrate as Muslims are achievements. So someone graduates college, somebody wants to celebrate an anniversary. Somebody might challenge that being married for so long is not an achievement, but anybody who's been married, you can tell them from last week, you can figure that out quick. That's an achievement. And then you have other holidays which have some question marks, and then you have others that are outright not allowed. And the ones that are coming up typically in this season are overwhelmingly not allowed, with the exception of probably Thanksgiving. So that's a quick overview. And you may want to ask, well, why not Halloween? It seems like it's fun. It's for the kids. They're trick-or-treating. They get to dress up. Nobody intends any evil mischief behind it. But the problem is us as Muslims, and a lot of the research which I take from is from one of my teachers, Dr. Abdul Hakim Quick, who was a PhD professor in history, and he also was a professor at the University of Toronto. He has a book called Holiday Myths. And if any Muslim wants to be educated in this manner, you should buy the book. It's very cheap. It's called Holiday Myths. I know he's given lectures here and there online with bits and pieces referencing it, but the book is quite intensive, and I don't know if it was his dissertation, a PhD or whatnot, but nonetheless, you could take a look at it. And one thing you learn is that Halloween in its origin was from years and years ago, thousands and thousands of years ago, and it was a pagan tradition where they actually used to celebrate the Day of the Dead on October 31st. And so they would make sacrifices on the day of the dead, of the eve of that day, so October 30th, in order to please the God of the dead. And so they would make sacrifices to kind of get good brownie points with him. And what they also believed was that the deceased, actually, if you oppress them in their lifetime, they actually can come back in the spirit form and harm you, and physically harm you. So in order to avoid that, they actually dressed up in costumes so their spirits wouldn't recognize them. That's where that comes from, believe it or not. And then you have this entire practice starting to get popular, because a lot of these cultures back then and these religions back then stemmed from nature around them. Right? And so winter, typically you would see nature around you dying. And so they believed that this was the day that the God of the dead would pass judgment over anybody who died in the past year. So this was that day. And then obviously obviously springtime comes around, and that's why you see some of their gods named after certain things of beginnings and whatnot. But nonetheless, this is the time of things dying. And so this is where that comes from. And that continued until some time, and you find the Christians faced this challenge before we did, right? Because this was shifting in the Celtic areas and Northern Europe. And so they had to face this problem before we did. And one thing we can learn from is the Prophet ﷺ said, you will follow in the footsteps of the previous religions before you. And he's warning us about that. He's not telling us that's a good thing. He's warning us. He said, step by step, inch by inch, you will follow them in everything. And he said, and then the last of you will remain who are upon the Quran and Sunnah, that you have to be very careful about this. And so look at the history of what they did in order to solve their people from celebrating and joining in the Day of the Dead. What they did is they had a holiday that they used to celebrate called it was called All Saints Day, and it was in May. They moved it to November 1st. And All Saints Day also had a nickname called All Hallows Day to also kind of represent the soul being venerated. And so October 31st naturally became named All Hallows Eve. And then after tradition, time, and culture, the language evolved and just named it Halloween, right? And so that continued to be practiced, but as long as you were celebrating, see, it's almost like they tried to mask.
But you know, that's really good history.
Yeah.
Really good context. But the ordinary people and the kid growing up in America, 98% probably don't even know what you just said.
Yeah,
okay? I didn't know that. All that details.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, but all I'm doing is have a little bit of fun. I'm not celebrating the dead. I'm not doing no kind of the season. Yeah. I'm just having a little bit of fun. Forget all that Celtic history.
Yeah.
Why can't the kids just trick or treat, people dress up and have a good time and forget about all the other stuff?
Yeah, because the root of this holiday is an evil root. And Islamically, we do not normalize the devil. Allah just said in the Quran that the devil is aduwwun mubin. He is a clear evil enemy. And what corporations did in America is they normalized it in a happy way. So they normalized witches, they normalized vampires, they normalized sacrificing and all of this witchcraft and all this stuff in order to make money on it. That does not mean that it's okay for us to participate. So us as Muslims, we have to be conscious of what this origin is. And until this day, where now satanic church is recognized by the government, you can actually worship the devil. This is their day. So you can't say today that, oh, well, it's not that. As a Muslim, you have to know that if the origin of something started out in a religious context or a pagan context, us as Muslims, we need to avoid that. And this is something that we need to empower our youth, right? We have to teach them that, listen, you have to, if you're not going to stand up for your relationship between you and God, then how are you going to be the generation that's going to stand between you and an oppressor? And an oppressor is far inferior to God. If they're not ready to stand up for what they believe in God and who they're worshiping and saying, no, I don't celebrate this. I don't join in doing all of this stuff. And the trick-or-treating, by the way, was added in American culture. It wasn't actually part of Halloween. And that was to sell confectionery items, obviously, right? So, and if you didn't treat them, they actually tricked you. You were actually told to egg the house or harm the house in some way. So, as a Muslim, we should not teach our children to give up their faith in order to merge into this culture. You're American, period. You don't need to prove that by dressing up for Halloween. And one other thing we should caution is that some Muslims try to do something called Halloween, where I've seen this lately. I don't know if you know, but some of the parents at home, what they're trying to do is they'll get kids, dress them up in the house, and they won't expose them to outside, but just so they could give them something to do. And if history teaches us anything, it's that if you learn from, and you'll see this with other holidays as well, that when you try to institute your own celebration to combat another celebration, you've screwed everything up.
Yeah, it's worse.
It's worse. Right. It's much, much worse. So Halloween is one of those we need to avoid at all costs. The only thing I will say to clarify, just in case some people are thinking about this, because this is the number one question that's a follow-up. Well, what if they knock on my door, they ring my bell, can I give them?
Yeah.
So the default is no. Believe it or not.
Take the lights off.
Those scholars said try to avoid being home if you think your neighborhood is very packed with that, which most of ours are, or just keep the lights off. Worst case, they said there's only one fatwa, which one of my teachers has given, that if you feel that there's truly a harm, like you're not in the best neighborhood, where they're really, maybe break some windows and that. Some people take this quite serious, unfortunately. And then yes, you can give to avoid the harm.
Or leave a box outside or something.
Yeah. But they said egging your house is not a harm. Let's be real. So you can do some scrubbing, but unfortunately, we should not participate.
So, okay, that's pretty good. Let's move off a little bit because we have more than just Halloween coming up.
Oh yeah.
We've got the Thanksgiving celebration. We've got, and I love Thanksgiving, so be interested.
Because of that, we'll say it's a lot of fun.
We've got Christmas coming up. By the way, the pumpkins are really cool. And this is fall. This is not just for our viewers. We're celebrating fall. The season change. It's not Halloween. Okay, we don't have faces or anything. But anyway, we've got Thanksgiving coming up. We've got Christmas coming up. We've got New Year's Eve coming up.
Yeah.
Where do they land?
I don't know if any of the viewers, and they can mention in the comments, and some of the the production crew here could tell us if they have comments. I think Christmas is pretty evident, without a doubt. The only issue I see is that some Muslims want to put a tree in the house these days, and this is one of the hints that the shaitan is putting. A lot of people don't actually realize where the tree symbolically comes from in Christianity. It's actually not a Christian tradition, it's a pagan tradition. And these pagans, they look at nature around them, right? And so they noticed that in the winter months, the only thing that wouldn't die was the evergreen tree. So out of a good luck amulet, they would take this evergreen tree and put it in the house, and they'd light a candle at the top of the tree in order to avert any bad spirits to enter the house. And that's why you actually see the wreath, the Christmas wreath, also made out of that same evergreen tree on the door,
right? Because
they want to protect their home from these things. And because of this, actually, this is one of the biggest shirk things the Prophet warned us about. So let alone, you could even say for decoration, the fact that it's tied to a bad demon amulet, and it's going to protect you from evil spirits is what it's intended for. This is absolutely something we have to avoid at all costs. Whether you think it's pretty or not, this is not from our tradition. It is 100% linked to this holiday, and we should not take part in it. And here's the worst part. Now I hear Muslims follow up, and they say, well, I'm going to put the tree in Eid. I'm not kidding. They get the tree. This is new. The shaitan has his ways of tricking people. So they put the tree in Eid, they put a moon on the top of crescent, and that's just the biggest bid'ah that we have going on, and it's because it's the shaitan feeding on ignorance. Some of the less knowledgeable ones that people are not so much aware of is Thanksgiving and New Year's. I think, alhamdulillah, at this point we know that Thanksgiving is fine. And the roots of Thanksgiving, it was never actually celebrated on November 25th like it is today, right? I think that's the day it's always celebrated, right? Am I right? November 25th.
It's the last Thursday.
It's the last Thursday. It's a Thursday, right? And so you find this celebration across many cultures, and he documents this really nicely in his book. And the reason is because all of the farmers, they would get all of these crops harvested in abundance around this time, and they wanted to thank God for this, and they would invite family, and just a little tradition there, just being thankful. And so yes, absolutely, it's fine. That's no problem, alhamdulillah, because we're always thankful.
Now, let me ask you a question on Thanksgiving. And since families get together, so my family get together, I don't know if your family get together.
We're all
What advice, it's a good thing to get families, if you think about it, how often do we really get families together? Besides probably Eid and Ramadan, I don't know. But now we have families together and they get together. You've lived here a long time. What advice would you give, since you're going to get together anyway, to make the best out of it?
The one thing I want to tell you is that there's just one thing I've noticed, and as long as we don't fall into this trend, I think us as Muslims will be fine. The thing that we're noticing is we give so much effort to these holidays like Thanksgiving, and yet you still have Muslims not taking off for Eid. It's mind-blowing, because this is something that the Prophet gave us. It's been our tradition in our religion for years and years, right? Every Muslim has celebrated it, and the fact that we will make the biggest gathering, which is not a wrong thing, on Thanksgiving, and then it's just a handful of people over for Eid. And here's what I say: as long as you really make Eid like your holiday, alhamdulillah, the children that I have around in our family, they are always looking forward to Eid. And this is something that my family, we sat together, and this is this comes back to a family discussion, that we make we make it our celebration.
It is the thing to look forward to.
That's it. And then Thanksgiving is great, right? So one of the things that you should recognize during these things is that family is getting together. Maybe this is a nice way to think about who you're having a grudge with, who you're not. Let all that go. Come together, right? Enjoy each other's company. We're always working. We're constantly working, and if we're not working, we're thinking about work, and we're asleep, we're dreaming about work. And this is just you have to relax. You have to wind down. You have to spend quality time with your family. And unfortunately, the NFL is killing that. We've got, I think, 3 or 4 games now.
But the games are not good this year.
No,
the Cowboys
so
are horrible.
So now we can spend.
But Sheikh Dawood also said an interesting tafsir last week is that we don't really spend a time thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what He has given to us.
That's true.
Right? And if you think about many of us living in North America, how blessed we are. Our families, our homes, our job, education. And we really, I think that we have so much to be thankful for, and we've got a day that we get together with our families, like make dua, give thanks to Allah, find something maybe that day you do in the form of charity, that you can give thanks for. I think those are all great things that you could just use as an opportunity to do things that are better, but do what it says, thanksgiving, give thanks to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He loves when we thank Him, right, and we show gratitude. Right, and not take what we have for granted. Let's switch a little bit. The not so religious holidays. Okay. I assume they're this is probably an easier one, but July 4th, Labor Day weekend. Those are not religious type holidays. They're political kind of like country holidays.
And if you look at the majority of the holidays, the federally recognized holidays, almost all of them are fine. The exception is the one we mentioned. So July 4th, again, you're celebrating independence. If you want to choose to partake in that, great. If you don't, fine. You want to light up fireworks, that's great. Thanks to our last governor, it's actually legal now. And so you can actually do all of those things. So that's no problem. Labor Day, Memorial Day, whatever you want to commemorate and whatever you want to celebrate, that's fine. Because again, if you look at what those holidays are, we said one of the general guiding guidelines for us in celebrating is some sort of achievement. And that was an achievement for the people, for a country that is based on freedom. And if you look, when the Prophet ﷺ, he came back from Fatih Mecca, there was a Jariya, a young girl who came to him and said, Ya Rasulullah, I made a vow to Allah that if you would have come back safely, not harmed from Fatih Mecca, that I would play this duf in public and I would sing. He said, keep your vow. And so she it's showing you that because of this accomplishment that Allah allowed them that victory, that they can celebrate that. So you understand that that's a form of achievement. One of the hairy ones that unfortunately get mixed and a lot of Muslims fail to recognize is New Year's. And New Year's is unfortunately a holiday we should not be participating in. Its roots are 100% pagan. It comes from a holiday they used to celebrate in ancient Rome called Saturnalia. And it was for about a month long. These folks, Saturnalia was during this time, and then it was another holiday called the Kintu or something like that, where it was named after the god of agriculture, right? And so what they did is they celebrated that because for them March 1st was actually the new year. In ancient Rome there was only 10 months, there wasn't 12. And Julius Caesar is actually the one who instituted a 12-month calendar because it stopped lining up with the god of agriculture's day. And the evidence for that is if you look at September, it has the root Latin word 7, and then October 8, and November 9, and December 10 for Deca. And it was 10 months in the calendar year. And later on, he brings in these astrologers and mathematicians, introduces Januarius and Februarius. And Januarius comes from Janus, which is the god of beginnings. And so that's why he named it Januarius. And so he shifted the celebration of agriculture for the new year, and he allowed it to still be part of Saturnalia, this day where it was insane what would go on for this month. Everything was upside down. If you were a slave, you actually became the master for a month. If you were a peasant, the kings actually let you rule the city, and you were infested in sexual activity, alcohol, partying. It was all wild business going on. You can look this up, Saturnalia, this day. And then later on, it continued that way until the church recognized again, people are celebrating this, and they called it wrong, they called it blasphemy. So they introduced Christmas on a day that the Romans used to celebrate, which was the birth of their infant God. And they believe he died for their sins. Are you seeing some similarities here?
Yeah.
And the early Christians actually called celebrating Christmas blasphemy. And even in the United States, the English Puritans that came here would not recognize Christmas as and then you're just recent, right? They wouldn't even recognize Christmas as a holiday. If you were caught celebrating Christmas in Boston, you were fined 5 shillings. To that extent. It wasn't until Pope, what's his name, Julius I, brings it in, and it's widely said that he brought it in to combat Sagittarius, which was their New Year's celebration. Until this day, what does everybody do for New Year's? They're looking forward to partying, looking forward to alcohol, they're looking forward to waking up next to someone that had no idea who it was. And unfortunately, whether you say, well, I'm not doing it for that, it's just the new year. Unfortunately, because this practice was based on that, and it's still being practiced today that way, we should not indulge in that. But everything else is fair game, right? You want to talk about Mother's Day, that's fine. Father's Day, that's fine. Again, for us as Muslims, the only touchy thing about Thanksgiving, Father's Day, and Mother's Day is that these should be every day.
Yep.
Don't forget that. You shouldn't restrict your Bid'ah by thing to 2 days a year, right? And then last but not least, the obvious ones, I hope, St. Valentine's, we don't partake in that, and St. Patrick's Day, obviously, for those...
Unless you drink it, St. Patrick's Day is no fun.
Yeah, and believe it or not, they actually celebrate a Saint Patrick. He was actually kidnapped at 16, taken away. He escapes, comes back to Ireland, and teaches them about Christianity. That's why they venerated him. They created a day for him.
So why don't we,
interestingly enough,
we have a question?
Okay, so we have one question. I'm going to kind of summarize what I think they meant.
Okay.
Is can we take advantage of holidays like Halloween and instead use them because they're so popular to give dawah instead?
Oh my God, I'm so glad they asked this question. So one of the conditions the majority of the scholars have mentioned for us as Muslims living in a non-Muslim country is dawah. So one of the things I have seen, and you know who are best with this, and I mean this, and I hope that us as Muslims who are born into families that are already practicing Islam can learn from them. Mostly the reverts and the converts, you find a lot of the Black American Muslims, you find a lot of the Spanish American Muslims, and even the white American Muslims. These folks are really doing the dawah more than we really are. I've seen some parents write letters to their teachers saying, hey, we don't celebrate Halloween, so if they're coloring a pumpkin or they're coloring something like that, but if they're told that, hey, for art, we're doing a jack-o'-lantern and here's a little thing, and you can write a letter to the teacher and simply say, hey, we don't partake in these kind of activities, maybe you can give my child another activity, and here is that suggestion for religious reasons. And same thing for Christmas. I know teachers that are so amazed and welcoming this kind of feedback that some teachers actually have looked online to print out some Islamic art that they could color, and they hang it up in the hallway for the children, and you'll see Santa, 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 and then all of a sudden, I don't know, you see some lantern or something, right? I don't know. Exactly. And it's for the Muslim kid, and alhamdulillah that we live in a society that's very welcoming. I would say that we're very lucky, especially in New Jersey. I can't speak on the rest of America. I'm sure there's certain parts that are pretty prejudiced when it comes to those things. But alhamdulillah, this is 100% a form of da'wah. I know some people that they think their da'wah is that they open the door during trick-or-treat and they hand them tamar, or dates. Well, number one, every
Kids don't like dates.
That is, you're getting egg.
They don't like
I'm
dates.
telling you, still getting egg. And not just that, there's so many warnings for parents when they're trick-or-treating to not accept open-itemed things, right? So now some parents said, well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go get Mahmoud. It's just, listen, you either do it for the right reason and don't try to blend it in. you're not giving dawah by handing a kid a mahmoud. He doesn't know what's going on. He's got his, his Superman costume or whatever, Superwoman. He just wants some candy. You handed him this date spilled, crushed it. It's not working out, right? Like a fig Newton.
No, you need some.
Yeah, right. I mean,
he's looking for the real thing.
Yeah, that's it. But yes, definitely use these holidays as a form of da'wah. I know I have a post ready even now. I'm posting about Halloween on Facebook just to clarify, but same thing. This is our opportunity why we don't engage in them. And alhamdulillah, you don't realize this, but it winds up empowering you to stand up for other things, right? It's not like it's you against the world. It's just telling them, this is my belief. This is what I believe in. I'm not harming you by believing this. And rather, I just wanted to explain why I do or I do not practice this.
Okay, so the person who asked the question, I apologize,
It's okay.
asked me to say the question as it was written. So, can we give dawah by distributing like the Quran for Halloween, giving out the Quran instead of candy?
And one of the things you have to absolutely be careful of is recognize two things. Number one, the people who are knocking on your door are not intellectual individuals for the most part. These are children who just want candy. This is what they see it as. Alhamdulillah, we teach our children why we don't participate. That's a side note. What they're going to do with the Quran, they're going to toss it. They're going to throw it. They're not going to respect it. It's not like this. So I would not recommend
I think timing is a bad thing, right? You're not ready for that message right now. You're looking for candies.
Yeah, and they're 7, right? They're 8, they're 9, they're 10. You're handing them a Quran. I mean, that's not. And alhamdulillah, we believe in our religion that any child who hasn't even hit the age of puberty is still Muslim. So you're handing a Quran to a kid who's already innocent on the fitrah, alhamdulillah. But nonetheless, I think there is time for it. And if you, like for example, maybe a way that you want to take advantage, if you spoke to the school teacher and say, if you want a copy of our book, I have it. You can offer it. Don't shove it down someone's throat. That's not a smart tactic. But that is an opportunity to do that one. So yeah, it's about having hikmah and when you would want to offer the Quran to someone. So you want to just be a little careful with that.
Any other question? So, in the spirit of holiday, in the spirit of celebrating, what about, our friends inviting us over? A lot of people have friends who invite them over. They might not celebrate Halloween. They might not celebrate New Year's Eve. Their friends might be drinking, but they're not drinking.
Yeah.
And they're the friends they hang out with all year. They come to our Eid celebration because we invite them. They come to the Eid ground, and then we feel like also they invite us to kind of quid pro quo. How does that work?
So the scholars differentiated two things. They said number one, for an individual who comes from a family where their family are not Muslim, that's one scenario, and then it's for a Muslim who's being invited either for work or for friends gatherings. So on the one hand, if you are Muslim living and you're part of a family who's not Muslim, then the scholar said you can attend and avoid all of the haram possible. Just attend for the dinner and restrict yourself to the minimum. Because at the end of the day, they're still your family and you must keep ties with them even if they were not Muslim. As far as people who are Muslim and they're invited to a work environment gathering or a friend or even a family member who just doesn't not necessarily care, but they're just like, well, I'm quote unquote modern, which I hate that word, but nonetheless, I'm just going with the flow here, and you could come, and it would be nice for you to come. Or a non-Muslim friend who's doing that. In those cases, we should not be attending. The scholars mentioned that because this celebration is something that we can't partake in, that we can't participate in, we also should not be attending those gatherings either. But they said that you should try to make up for that, but like you said, inviting them to the Eid celebration and trying to accommodate for that, to show that you're not somebody who's refusing because you're cheap or you're arrogant thinking you're better than them, but rather you enjoy their company, you still want them over, and to keep the ties together. And they said, and then maybe try to have a gathering with each other, church sometime after that, so that there's no hard feelings. Because sometimes the Eid might come 4 or 5, 8 months later. You don't want that lingering. Well, he didn't attend. Maybe a month later, invite them over, have a little gathering at your house or something like that.
Well, I think this has been enlightening. We've talked a little bit of holidays and holiday season. I hope our families and friends at home and the kids that are listening get a little bit of history, but get a little bit of clarity as we move into the holiday season. There's a lot to be done.
Yeah.
There's a lot still to be, you can enjoy and have fun with without
Absolutely.
crossing the line. So once again, would like to thank everyone for joining us for our Fireside Chat. Thank you all. Have a great evening, and look forward to the debate. If you want to switch over to the channel and watch the debate, and remember that we all are encouraged to vote, exercise your right, and vote. So thank you. Good night. Assalamu alaikum. I'm looking forward to you joining us again next week, inshallah, on Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. Assalamu alaikum.